Hi everyone, welcome to our live, which is titled Hate Speech is Toxic. In 2005, my family watched in tremendous pain and horror at the disengagement in Gaza. For those who are perhaps too young to have been around then, the Israeli government, we had settlements in all throughout Gaza Strip, and in 2005, Ariel Sharon decided to unilaterally pull out of the Gaza Strip. All those families were taken away from their homes where they lived all their lives and moved to places all over Israel. We talked about it, my wife and I talked about it a while, and we decided that our yeshiva Darchei Noam, we would adopt a community. We were going to adopt a family, but we said, no, let's do a community. We adopted the community of Atzmona, that beautiful town right by the ocean. We bought book bags for all the children at the beginning of the school, filled with supplies. Our students wrote them letters, and we planned on keeping this relationship between our school and theirs for a while. Hanukkah time, we had our daughter Fegi was in Israel, and I went there to visit her, of course, but to go spend time in Atzmona with the folks from Atzmona. They relocated to an airport hangar, and when we drove there, when we pulled up in front of where those families were staying, we literally pulled over to the side and we were sobbing. The conditions there were beyond primitive. I have a difficulty describing it. I took some pictures. If I remember, I'll post them up afterwards. Here's the point of it related to this topic. I went into the school. They had a makeshift school there, and the principal of the school took me around on a tour. Remember, we were visiting with children who had lost their home 4 months ago, beautiful homes, and we're now living in extremely difficult, primitive, almost conditions. And they had posted on their bulletin board all the letters that our children sent them and the communication. Anyway, after visiting 2 classrooms and speaking to the children, the lawyers say, don't ask a question you don't want to, without knowing the answer first. I asked one of the classes, I said, kids, what could I do for you? In my difficult Hebrew, I said, is there anything I can do for you guys? So one of the kids raised his hand. He says, "Ani rotze lahzir habayta." Could you get me back home? So there was a tremendous amount of pain. But after the second classroom that I observed, I called a timeout. I asked the principal, please take me to the rabbi of this community. So we walked together. He said, why? I said, I'll talk to you there. And I sat down with the 2 of them, and I said, I am beyond shocked that the children had absolutely no hate in them. They weren't angry, they weren't bitter, they were terribly sad, but there was no anger or hatred in them at all. I found, as an educator and, being around children all my life, I found it astounding. I said, how did you guys do this? So they said, they started pushing. I said, come on, stop this. I always say, nobody meanders their way to excellence. This is an amazing quality that you've managed to give the kids. Like, how did you do this? So the rabbi got very serious, and he said, we talked it over among ourselves before the disengagement, and we said, something? If we allow our children to get bitter and hateful to the Arabs, to life, to politics in Israel, whoever was behind the disengagement, he says, we're going to lose this entire generation. They called that place they were in Ir Emunah, the city of faith. I went back to yeshiva, to America, and I called an assembly, and actually I encouraged the parents to come down. I related what I had seen, and I told them, I said, remember all your lives, never hate. Hate is toxic, it's poison. It consumes you, and it just takes your soul away. And if you look at the situation with the Palestinians, they haven't had good leadership that will tell them, okay, guys, let's move on and build a community where we are. they're still fighting, and they're still where they are. Not only destroying themselves and being difficult for Israeli society, hate is poison. And I mention this because this is a new experience for us, that we have this digital space where we communicate, and we communicate rapidly. This is the first, we're getting used to this ourselves. And I really encourage everyone, but especially parents of children, to be mindful of what you write, to be mindful of what you speak, what you convey, how you convey it. It's not healthy for us. And it's certainly not healthy to our children to hear this. All the more so when religion gets somehow mixed into this. And if for religious purposes, quote unquote, we engage in discussions and with anger and hatred and personal attacks on people, not specific people, but specific people also, but communities of people. That is not a way to transmit our Masorah, our heritage, our beautiful Torah to our children. I was fortunate to have two incredible rabbis. Look what an effect they had on me. And mentors, Rabbi Pam, Zechut Tzadik Livracha of blessed memory, and in a very different venue, Rabbi Josh Silverman's, Zechut Tzadik Livracha, in camp. He was my head counselor for 13 years. I never heard either of them raise their voices. I never heard either of them say anything harsh to anyone. They felt very passionately about what they did, but everything was conducted in a certain way. And because of that, I grew up, and now especially as an adult, this type of speech to me is just, it's just different. It's so not what I'm used to. And, the fact of the matter is that when people teach hate, people will tell you to hate this person and this group or this, whatever it is. The people wind up, initially they hate the one they're being told to hate. Eventually they hate the person who told it to them, and eventually they just hate themselves. So I appeal to everyone to please, let's use this digital space constructively. We should have discussions with each other passionately, but without these personal attacks. I told my students then, and every graduating class, it was a very strange thing. I spent 10 years with the children. I got them at age 4 to preschool, and they left my school at 13, and they went off to lots of different schools. So I knew that they're going to be subjected to other wonderful people, but I wanted to leave them certain messages. And one of the things I told them is that the Torah can be interpreted in many different ways. That's the beauty and sometimes the challenge of interpreting text, interpreting this beautiful Torah that Hashem gave us. It can be interpreted many different ways, and there are many different verses that can be interpreted in different ways. So I told my students often during the 7th and 8th grade that if someone who's teaching you Torah, and that Torah makes you walk away feeling more generous, more compassionate, more empathetic, a better person, striving for greatness, but not being judgmental and harsh to other people, you're learning from the right person. But if you go to someone who teaches you to be angry and hateful and like that, and talks about sin all day, you're not at the right address. The Torah is supposed to make us a certain way. And I always humbly try to pass on the legacy of shalom, of peace, and menschlichkeit, of being kind and compassionate, from my parents first, from my Rabbeim, and hopefully now in this digital space as well. One great way of getting the measure of a person, I have found this to be foolproof. I have never seen a single exception to this. just count the positive and negative comments that people are saying. It's foolproof, at least in my experience. That goes for political people you follow. That goes for people you respect, mentors, people you emulate and you want to become like. It goes for religious teachings, positive to negative comments. Rav Pam had at least 99 to 1, if there was a 1. Rabbi Josh, and they conveyed, they gave us tochacha. They told us many times about different things we did, especially Rabbi Silverman's in camp. It was at least 99 to 1. Rav Yakov Kamenetsky says, just a short Torah thought, that when Yaakov Avinu, our patriarch, Jacob, when he went to the well and he saw some shepherds hanging around there, and he asked them, Achai me'ayin, my brothers, where are you coming from? So Rabbi Yakov Kamenetsky says, why did he call them brothers? Like, he didn't even know them. So Rabbi Kamenetsky answered that Yaakov Avinu, our patriarch Jacob, was a man of truth, and he was offended by the fact that they weren't doing their job. It was the middle of the day, and they were just hanging around the well. During those days, you worked sunrise to sunset. So he was offended by the fact that they weren't giving their boss a full day's labor, and he wanted to tell them about it. So he had to start by telling them Achai first, relating to them as a brother with a personal connection before he even started there. Take the measure of people, positive comments to negative comments. I know that I block people from my own in my life and in my social media. When I see people are just spouting negative things all the time, I say nothing good is going to come out of it. This is toxic. Those people bring everybody around them down. So let's please try to convey this stuff, whatever we're talking about, in a more decent way, in a more kind way, in a way that doesn't attack personally. We talk about it and not whom. And hopefully we'll be able to have these discussions in a better way. I just want to finally point out, one final thought is that when this is mixed with religious practice, the research shows, and I've seen this anecdotally, the next generation, it's almost, the younger you get, the more typically, and of course generally speaking, the more tolerant and understanding they are, non-judgmental they are. Lots of different researchers will tell you different reasons for that, but that's the reality. So I just wanted to explain to you, if you're conveying your religious practice in a harsh way, either to your own children by talking to them in a harsh way, or being very punitive about it, rather than exposing them to the beauty of what you want to tell them, it might work in the short term, but mark my words, sometime in the future, when they're adolescents, when they're adults, you might have a discussion about religious practice, and they might throw it back at you, saying, well, look at the way you're talking. Remember you said this and this and this about those and those people? So that's not the reason you should do it. But I'm done. I plan on speaking about this some more. I think it's an important topic. It's Erev Shabbos, it's Friday, so I'm keeping my words short. Wishing you all a beautiful Shabbos. And let's try to see what we can do to elevate our discussion among ourselves. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful Shabbos.